Yes, finally we're back with an update. It's been over a year, so I thought let's make some time to give you guys a full update. So I'll give you an update on everything that's happened on suspension, brakes. We'll go to the engine bay, and then at the end we'll go into the cabin. So in the last episode we tried to start the car. That didn't happen. We did crank it over, so the engine actually spun over. However, we didn't start it. So let's see if we can start it today. But first, let's look at the brakes. So for the rear, so we had our E24 subframe on the rear. So there we fitted then our 540 brake discs. So these were just fit on there as they came off the 5 Series that used the same suspension. But with that, we chose for some bigger brakes. So we went for these Porsche calipers. On forums there were like multiple posts of people actually doing this, so a lot of positive reactions. So I managed to fit these with a custom adapter. So now we should have good brakes on the rear compared to our power and weight ratio. I think this will really help the car improve on handling and performance. But yeah, so once we have our brakes, let's have a look at how we will actually drive the car forward. Put that power from the engine to the wheels. So with the engine and gearbox sitting in the car, let's have a look at how we then will provide that power to the wheels. So because of the gearbox that's sitting in a different location as the old 6 Series was sitting, and this differential is also not made for this car, we had to come with a custom prop shaft. So that's made to length. So it doesn't have a center support, it's just one straight axle towards the differential. So that's all fitted now. Then onto the differential. So we managed to find the limited slip diff from a 540. This had to be moved a bit forward to clear all the bodywork on top. So it's like 4 millimeters forward, but that's okay. The drive shafts still line up nicely. So then also we used again the 540 drive shafts, which will then go onto the trailing arms. Once we get that power to the rear wheels, yes, we have our brakes, but yeah, we also have then modern ABS fitted. So we'll use the F Series ABS system. So the pump, the ECU, and then yes, the sensors. So we managed to just mount the F20 sensors onto the hub or to the trailing arm. And with that, we found sensor rings with the right amount of pulses that also the F Series would use. So we should have a full drivetrain with brakes, and now we're also down here. Let's have a quick look at the exhaust. Okay, so when looking at the exhaust for this project, we don't have to run a catalytic converter. So we took a downpipe from an N55, which doesn't have any catalytic converter, coming down as like 3-inch. So 3-inch feed band to connect the exhaust up to the downpipe onto a flexi. And from that flexi, we already have our next mounting point. So for the gearbox mount that we got from the F Series, it already had this mounting point and bushing for the exhaust. So that's kept in place there. Then coming around, we try to stay as high as possible because yeah, the car will already be quite low, at least lower than what its 6 Series used to be. And this will be the point where you have the speed bumps. So we immediately went up as close as possible to our prop shaft. So then we already have our first silencer. So this is a longer silencer than the others. So this will reduce most of the noise. From that, continuing back, more 3-inch pipes up to the rear subframe. Also here, we managed to reuse the original hang point for the exhaust of the 5 Series. So the E34. With that, going into our second silencer. This is a more slim silencer, but perfect fit for under the subframe. It was a bit of fiddling around, but we managed to get it nicely in here. And then as last, we come to our last silencer. So with this, we can now opt for some options what we'd like to do on the exhaust. I'm not really sure if it will be centered or if it will still be a bit off-center. But anyway, we can play a bit with that and also with our bumper design. Yeah, so that will summarize the exhaust. Let's have a look at how that looks in overall. Alright, so let's go a bit more in depth on the changes that are required on the front suspension. So enable to run our F20 ABS system, so including the sensors and the ABS pump, we had to make some changes to the front kingpin. So as on the old E46, the sensor was mounted directly like this and was reading the pulses on the inside, so from the axle. Now what we want to do with the F21 is to mount the sensor in a bit more. So for our sensor ring, our magnetic sensor ring, we would have to move it in a bit, so we fill up this area and we had to machine out the slot a bit more. Then we'll apply a custom 3D printed part to fill up that space and to make it nice and snug in there. And that now we can run our F20 ABS system, and the wheel speed sensors will all be happy. So let's put it on. So yes, this will be then an N55 running with hydraulic steering. So instead of using the electronic steering, power steering from the F series, we added the pump from an N54 and all the belts that tested with it. But more on that in a separate video. So now we have our kingpin installed. Let's install the sensor. So next up will be our E46 dust cover. For there we had to sacrifice a little bit of the dust cover to make our new adapter fit, which we'll show later. But also there, enabled to have the sensor move in a bit. We just slightly cut it out, and hopefully this way it will not interfere with our magnetic field of the sensor ring. So this is all we will just tighten down according to a normal 6mm M6 torque. Next up we will mount our wheel hub. This wheel hub now has the sensor ring with the right amount of pulses for our ABS to be satisfied according to the F20 series. So a little bit machining down, making an adapter, and then make it adjustable. We want to make it adjustable to have a good air gap between the sensor and the ring. That's also according to BMW spec, I believe between 1mm and 1.5mm. So that's what it's set to. So let's put that on. Alright, so that should be the ABS system satisfied. Of course you still have to connect the sensor. Next up, the challenge of mounting bigger brakes. Why do you want bigger brakes? Bigger engine, lighter car in total. So we managed to go for some Audi Q7 calipers. So these are Audi Q7 for MB4M. So in order to mount these, we had to come with some custom adapter. So we will be going on the E46 pickup points, and then we will mount those then directly to the caliper. So first made design of a 3D print that will then fit in, and indeed where we cut away our dust cover, and then from a 3D print to a full aluminium manufactured part. So that will be for both left and right side of the car. Let's put that on. So here we put in some inserts, 12mm fine threaded. For now we just put them good hand tight, we'll set them to torque later. So that's the adapter on, then we can move on to the brake disc. Alright, here we go. So in order to fit this 375mm disc, we had to make some adjustments. So these were Audi bolt pattern. We had to go to BMW 120x5. So that we had to machine out, slot it out there. And also on the back side or on the hub side, yeah, we didn't want to remove any material from the brake disc, so we removed it from the wheel hub. So that should now fit on well. So yes, here we cannot use the helper, the small bolt that keeps the disc from falling off. So for now we'll just keep this bolt on there, and once the wheel comes on, this will be fully tied up. Alright, so now we can go on fitting up the caliper. Let's start getting that in. And again, this big caliper hold in place by 12mm fine threaded bolts. Yes, and also for now we just tighten them up, but yes, please don't do this at home. Just set everything to torque spec. I'll do this later off camera, just to get you guys some nice experience. Fully fitted brakes and ABS sensor. So now up next would be the wheel. We're still waiting for our wheels. See if that will actually fit, because we're gonna have a interesting. I want to run 18-inch. But with this big brake disc and caliper, we definitely need some offset wheels that still fit the car nicely, but also still fit our brake discs. Alright, so now we're down here. Let's look at the front of the car as well. So as you've seen in the previous videos, we fitted the engines. The engine is sitting on this E46 subframe. So yes, we had to cut it to length to fit in between its chassis legs. Still, the engine mounts sitting on the outside of the subframe. They had to be, the chassis legs had to be cut out a bit in order to mount these engine mounts. But yes, that's been all welded up and stiffened, so that should be no problem when it comes to rigidity. So with that, then that E46 subframe sitting in, using the same wishbones from E46. So in order to keep all the steering and suspension kind of like as it's designed, to not create extra bump steering wheels going in when the car squats or when it goes out, we use these same wishbones as E46. Yeah, they also had to be mounted onto the chassis leg, so that was a bit of welding up. So we now have them sit nice and parallel, wheels nice and centered in the arches, and so that will be that suspension part. With that, mounting our steering. Yes, the N55 usually came with electronic power steering. That's becoming then an issue if we're having this whole suspension setup from E46. So we then went back to the hydraulic steering. So getting a purple rack from Z4 or a 3 series of that platform, so the E46 platform. Keeping a nice short ratio. So this purple rack has a short lock to lock, so giving that hopefully that sporty feeling when I start driving this car. The adjustments we had to make there was more regarding the lines and our pump. So N55 of course then also never came with this hydraulic pump. So we had to find a pump that fitted onto the mounts that were on the sump and also on the engine. And then of course making the lines towards the pump and towards the reservoir. But we'll see the reservoir up when you look at the engine bay. So that would be then the steering all set. Looking at then the stabilizer bar or anti-roll bar that's been bolted on. So we had to create some pickup points or mount points on the chassis legs to also get that in. But it's now nice and firm in there. Then else, cooling. So the engine oil cooling. So on the N55, which had the sport option, they had an additional radiator sitting on the passenger side over here. However, I didn't have the volume to kind of like create lines going that way, so I managed to put them on the driver's side. So we run these NA hydraulic lines towards this radiator, which is just a universal NA radiator. And out to the front, yes, our intercooler, having the pipe up to the turbo as the same as an original N54 or F series car. However, then on the intake side, where the intake manifold is, we had to come with a custom aluminium pipe because of all the volume conflicts over there. I think that will be good that we now have a look in the engine bay, how that all looks. So then now let's look at the engine bay. Let's start with the passenger side. So we're having our distribution point for the starter. This is applying the power towards the starter, and also from our alternator, the power is coming back to this distribution point. So that's nicely and firm in there. Then our coolant reservoir. So this is the coolant reservoir of the F series, 3 series, 1 series. So for the 1 series that the engine came from, it's roughly sitting in the same spot, so I don't expect any strange heat distribution or strange behavior there. But we'll see. Onto the intake. As originally the intake for the N55 usually goes to the driver's side. However, for us, we're running the hood quite low with then the radiator sitting all here. We could not mount it that way, so we ended up routing it to the passenger side. So this is also where the old 6 series would have had his air intake. So the intake box would be here and then onto the intake over there. So I think this is a good spot to have it mounted. With that we have our air sensor, so MAP sensor, also connected up. From there, let's have a look to then the driver's side. So on the driver's side we have our power steering reservoir. So as all of the E46 components, our steering components, also the reservoir. In front of it, it's the heat exchanger for the gearbox. So in order to get the oil for the gearbox quicker up to speed, the oil is then, the heat from the oil is exchanged with the heat from the coolant. So as the coolant will go up to temperature quicker, so our oil for the gearbox will get up to temperature quicker. So that's mounted in front. Then we have another distribution point for electronics. So here more of the sensors, and the DME computer is connected up into the wiring loom. So next up, our ABS pump. So all the F series from the BMW uses the Bosch MK100. That I got from a 1 series, and the connector was straight plug and play, and also the communication has already been established. So that is all fine. At last, then the brake pedal. So how are we gonna boost that pressure that we apply to the brake pedal up to the power that we need for ABS module? Normally BMW would use vacuum boosts, they all operate under vacuum. We tried to look at various models. They're often quite large, round and large. We couldn't really fit them in this car. So we had to investigate and look a bit further. So then we saw people experimenting with these e-boosters. So the e-boosters are often used in Teslas and in Jaguar e-Pace. So we managed to look at that. So instead of using vacuum, these boosters are actually run out of 12 volt. So they boost it that way. So that nicely fits in here. So that's then the pedal towards the booster, and then on the end of the booster we have our master cylinder. So that kind of summarizes what's changed in the engine bay. So then now let's have a look in the cabin. Then in the cabin, we managed to get our wiring in, our center console and our steering. So the wiring coming from the rear, out of the battery and the rear modules, going along the passenger side up to our front electronic module, as to the main control unit within the F series. Also here we have our distribution box, which is normally would sit in the engine bay. I would like to have a clean look in the engine bay, plus it was nicer to fit it down here than finding a spot over there. Then more of the electronics would go to the driver's side, but also in the middle we managed to put our center console in. So out of a 2 series, I found this nice center console that I think would give a good modern look in this classic car. So with that, the iDrive screen, then of course the gear knob also nicely fits in there. Our sport and eco buttons would be nice in the center. Moving to the driver's side, so for the driver's side our steering wheel is in, so our full steering column out of the F series, mounted up and functional, so that's connected with an adapter onto the E46 steering rack. Yes, we'll also be using the instrument cluster from the F series, and hopefully I can get that nicely fitted into the dashboard. Pedals, so we have our accelerator pedal and our brake pedal fitted, and then more of the electronics going to the engine bay, so that's all to the DME. Then we're still working on the electronics on the roof, so we have all of these wires going to the roof for our sunroof. So probably I would like to use the electronics and the motor from the F series to control this old 6 series sunroof. So also with that, our controls for sunroof, but our rain sensor, our mirror, rear viewing mirror. And yeah, that kind of summarizes a bit quickly what we've done in the cabin. So now let's have a look if the car actually starts. Alright, so the moment of truth. Will it actually run? Let's find out. Let's see. Yes, so it runs, it drives, goes back and forth, it brakes, and yes, the new wheels. What do you guys find on the new wheels? Please let a comment below what you think. Yes, no, and then we'll see you soon in the next video. For now we'll stop here and continue to work. Thank you all for watching.